I grew up for a number of years at my grandparents' house while my mother was trying to sort out things in her life. I called her Spooky, which made sense, and I called my grandfather Daddy. Now, the kids in the neighborhood called my grandfather Mr. Daddy. He was a lot of a guy. He was about 350 pounds, and he had, imagine this, he had just lots of personality. He'd run the neighborhood grocery store and sold cars and sold houses, and he was just all over. And he would hold an Easter egg hunt. Now, you need to know there are about 15 to 20 kids there. He gathered the whole neighborhood. And this was an Easter egg hunt on steroids. There was probably 100 or so eggs out there, and some of them were like regular eggs that nobody wanted. Some of them were chocolate eggs. That's a trade-up. They were plastic eggs, and sometimes there'd be jelly beans, or sometimes there'd be a quarter or a 50-cent piece. Anybody remember 50-cent pieces? All right. The dollar pieces, and then there'd be a 5 in there somewhere, and that's big money in 1963. And there would even be a 10 and a 20, and that bought a lot of baseball cards. So the grown-ups, the adults, would be out there, and we'd all have to huddle in the living room with our shoes off. And my grandfather would come in and, we're almost ready, we're almost ready, we're almost ready. And we'd be like, sort of like what the acolytes look like on Easter morning. and the adults, for that matter. My uncle would do the whistle, which I never learned. And then there was a lot of yard. My grandmother had at least 7 gardens that I can remember. And then ivy all over the place. And we could count on all those places to find eggs. We could also count on, there were about 6 bird baths that hadn't been cleaned out since the fall. There were eggs there. We had, on the side part of the yard, it was a cement tub with a frog that had a little spout. I used to call it the barfing frog. My grandmother was never pleased about that. You'd clean it out for 3 days and it would work for 1 day. They'd be in there. And we had a rubbish heap. This is when you could burn rubbish. We had a rubbish heap. They were there. There was a picnic table over the fence that was rotting in the woods. That was a prime place to get the eggs. And then right in the middle of the yard, there was a barbecue pit that had been built long ago, but the trees had grown up around it. You could barely see it, and I could never figure out how is it that my 300-pound grandfather could squeeze in there to put it there. Now the kids would go scurrying, and if anybody showed up in their Easter finery, it was gone. They'd come back grubby. One little girl was never allowed to come back. And we'd come in, and he'd say, how many eggs? We'd tell him the eggs. There's more. We'd go. And the kids would peel off in time. They're just like, they're tired. And we could begin to see the adults getting bored, and they're getting tired. And there was always a couple of kids who would not come in until the last egg had been found. And we never did find them all. It was just pandemonium and confusion. The first Easter morning was pandemonium and confusion. If you look at all the accounts on Easter morning, none of them are consistent. It's really hard to find Jesus. They go to the tomb, there's nothing there. They're afraid that Jesus has been stolen. The women come back with a report, and the guys don't believe them. Amen. Anyway. That Jesus has been raised, and they're like, we need to see this for ourselves. And then Peter and John are competing with each other the whole way to the tomb and elbowing each other. Who's going to get there first and who's going to get it? And it's kind of wild. Jesus is standing right there. Mary doesn't recognize him until he says, "Mary, I'm here." So there's some similarities between the Easter egg hunt, where it's so hard to find Jesus, so hard to figure out where he is, and where we are with Jesus. Where is he? How do we know him? I'm not sure if there are more important questions than those. If we're going to be able to answer those questions, there's something that I need to turn completely upside down. The Easter message is not that we find Jesus. The Easter message is he comes and finds us. He came to be part of our flesh at his birth. He came to us to die to forgive us. He came to us in his resurrection to give us the hope that we can be raised someday. We can join someday all those who have gone before. But he means to lean straight back into our life with the power to raise each one of us now from wherever we are living, in whatever tomb it might be. So, in other words, we're the egg. I mean, not just an egg, but you're an egg. We're an egg. And he's the hunter. Or if that's a little sharp, then he's the searcher, the seeker. But he's here to find us. Now, saying that, over the years, I've heard a number of questions about who Jesus seeks. One question is, working with Easter images, is there enough room in his basket for me? In his heart? Yes. It's an infinite amount of room. I've heard some people say that, well, there's no way he's going to want me because I've lived in the rubbish bin, or I've lived in the rot, or this is who I am, or this is who I love. I've heard people say, am I going to be good enough? And the response to that is, it's not about any one of us being good enough. It's about him being more than good enough. I've heard people say, well, he's going to get weary and give up. Never. He's going to get bored. Never. I mean, I think he gets a little frustrated now and again, but that's a different sermon. His hunt for us is not just for here and now. I've heard people say, well, someday it might just be too late for me. And I'm here to tell you it's never too late. Because if Jesus doesn't get you in this life, he's got eternity. I mean, what do you think eternity's for? You think we just get there and we're done? That's boredom. He intends to collect us all because we're all the beloved children of God. If you look at the life of Jesus, there are no outcasts. The Pharisees keep on saying, no, you can't touch that one, you can't, no, you can't do that one, you can't, no. And their world was about like this big. How dare any church, any pastor ever preach a resurrected Jesus that's this big? He laid out his arms on hardwood the cross to embrace the whole world. He was resurrected to embrace the whole world. First time I preached on Easter was 1984. I'd just been ordained, and I was at the cathedral where the dean is and about 9 other priests and the bishop, and we had a lot of us. But they were very glad to give me the early morning service. And I was very glad to have the opportunity. And all week, getting in preparation, I kept on asking myself, what do I really believe? Not what do I need to pray, not what the prayer book has to say, but what is it that I actually believe happened? You can be a priest and not ask yourself that question. You can go, and I'm sure you've seen priests who are kind of like, but I need to tell you that every Easter I ask myself that question. I have to. What is it that I believe? This is what I believe. I do not believe that the resurrection of Jesus is a myth, a dream, a hope, a memory. I believe, and words can't capture it, I believe it actually happened. That he was actually there. Now, I had two pieces of evidence to get me, yeah, I do believe this. I absolutely do. One is that the 12 minus 1, 11, those ninnies would have never come back together in 2 days. I just don't see it. They'd already denied, betrayed, run. I mean, they were gone. But they came back together with an energy that began to change the world. How do you make sense of that other than that Jesus said, I'm here. Look at the wounds. The other piece of evidence that I had at that point was I looked at my own life and I knew that without the resurrected Jesus, I was dead. I got into my share of trouble. I was just a guy. But there were so many places I could have gotten so lost and in so much trouble. My life didn't make any sense unless there was somebody else along. I've accumulated more evidence on the resurrection of Jesus. And I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it right now. I'm looking at you. Anybody here have more Jesus than you might have had earlier in your life? Anybody here been given hope? Anybody here now know you are a beloved child of God? Anybody here know that the grace covers everything you could do? Anybody here who knew who you now belong to? Well, about 4 of you. All right. Oh. Work with me a little bit. I mean, I know you're a bunch of Mainers, but come on. Yeah, and there's more evidence I got. What's happened to this church in 2.5 years? I mean, you think we got here on our own? We are right now where we are because the resurrected Jesus has been here, working through us and in us, giving hope where there was no hope, giving direction where there was no direction other than shooting at each other. But now we're a community, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one Lord and God and Father of us all. Amen? Amen. I love Easter. Not that it's always well coordinated, but anyway, I love all the music. I love all the hymns. I love it all. And at the same time, we need to love all of it, and we need to remember the first Easter morning where there wasn't all this fanfare. I love all this, but nobody can sustain the energy that's here into life. We need to have the resurrected Jesus while we're getting lost with our spouse and the GPS does not match up. I'm not speaking for me, but for any one of you. We need Jesus around. We need Jesus, the resurrected Jesus, as we do the chores and as we get tired and as we snap at each other and as we wonder what it's all about and when we're just bored to death. The line that holds all this together with all the other pieces of our life where we need to resurrect Jesus. There's one line. There's one line that takes us from this life to the next. There's one line that brings us together into wholeness and peace and grace. One line. Alleluia, Christ is risen. Amen.